There we go. So we can turn our cameras on now. Sheila and Chef Thomas and all the folks at World Chef's office there, Lynn and Senya, who make everything happen. Without them, we'd all just be staring at computer screens. Yes, indeed. Excellent. So we have Saudi Arabia, Guam, who have joined us. It is so much fun. I always say this, but it really is so much fun to see the entire world come together for these things. It's literally the entire world. And there's a number of you that I met in Abu Dhabi. So I got to actually, put a face to the names that we see here often, which was a lot of fun. Thomas, it was fun in Abu Dhabi, huh?
Absolutely, great happening, and I think it was the first time during or after the really big impact of COVID that the people was gathering, and it was a perfect exchange.
It really was. All right, so I think it is time, excuse me, and why don't we go ahead and get started here. Thomas, do you want to kick this off, and then I'll take it from there?
Look, it would be perfect. Of course, always a great pleasure having you all on. Actually, I think these kind of webinars are so important, especially nowadays. And first of all, I wanted to wish you all to stay safe and healthy, and congratulations to Chris and the entire team for making, I so would say, the world a better place, making the impossible possible, and going for having zero waste all around the world. I think it's really amazing. I mean, whatever it's throughout the entire world, we are leading the entire hospitality industry, and we can set examples. And I just count on you, as I said in Abu Dhabi. We have to go and believe in the power of the white jacket, going ahead, thinking modern and out of the box. And the most important thing is that we all take care about our future in regards to sustainability and definitely environmental consciousness. And saying that, I just can wish you all a fantastic webinar today. I'm wishing you, Chris, that you lead it in a fantastic way, thanks to the team behind the scenes who make it possible from the office, definitely in Paris. And I'm wishing you a fantastic learning today and a great day. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And Chef, always a huge thank you to you and all your support, because your support and the board support is critical to what we do. So thank you. We don't have a ton of time. These things always go by way too fast. So I'm going to jump right in. Again, it's a pleasure to have all of you with us today, whatever time zone you happen to be in. Today we have a really, really special guest. And I have her bio up in front here, which I'm going to sort of scan in just a second. But Sheila Bowman, the first thing is, and a big round of applause, okay, because Sheila lives in California, which means it is now 5:03 in the morning, which means she got up at like 4 o'clock this morning and just to be with us. So a huge shout out, Sheila, thank you. And the other really great thing about Sheila is, if you listen to that recording just a few minutes ago, and all about the curriculum, and we said, we developed this sustainability curriculum with partners, with experts that we relied on, excuse me, that we brought with us on this journey, because we don't know everything, right? And so Sheila Bowman is with the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch program. She is an expert in all things ocean, all things fishing, and she helped us write the curriculum. So it's really, really a pleasure to have her here. She also helped with the revision that we've done and the digitization that we've done as well. Before I get any further, I do have to mention, this is a special webinar today, because this webinar is actually a United Nations side event for the Ocean Conference 2022 that's going on right now. And this is a big deal that we're part of that. Because as we know, chefs play a critical role in all things sustainability, and even things like the UN recognizes the role that we play and how important it is. So with that, so real quickly, our guest today, and again, Sheila Bowman is joining us. She is, once again, Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program. We'll talk about that in a minute, but she is a career marine scientist and a passionate conservationist. She has worked with consumers and businesses for 20 years, all about promoting sustainable seafood. And I would also say that she has worked closely with chefs throughout this time as well. So she developed a strategic approach for the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program. And that helped really chefs, educators, food media really understand, what we should be doing and which seafood we should be consuming. So she supports culinary leaders all over the world from the vantage point of science, which is so important. And of course, then she helps us know what we should do. So she worked with them for 30 years, and now she is a consultant with Seafood Watch. So with that, Sheila, a huge and very, very early good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Chris, and everyone who's on the line. I'm just really pleased to be here today.
Wonderful. So before we get a whole lot further here, just for everybody on this webinar today, can you just give me kind of a 2-second overview of Monterey Bay Aquarium, Seafood Watch, just about the program that you have really pioneered and worked with?
Absolutely. So the aquarium has opened in the 1980s, and hopefully a few of the people on the line have been here. If you haven't, I certainly encourage you to come on out to California and visit us. We're in about the middle of the state, right on the coast. And the Monterey Bay Aquarium was always special, a special place. We really focused on the habitats and the animals that live in our neighborhood, in our region. So when you come here, you'll see our kelp forest exhibit with all of the big fish and the big plants and the tiny creatures that would live in the kelp forest that's right outside our door. So it's a really great opportunity for people who don't dive to really start to understand what's going on under the surface. And I think that kind of understanding and awareness is such an important piece of becoming engaged in preserving and protecting. Not for nothing, when people come in, one of the first things they do is they point and they say, "Oh, there's a tuna. I sure love tuna. Oh, there's abalone. I so love abalone." So we learned very quickly that as much as we think of these as wildlife, we equally think of them as things that are on the dinner plate. And hopefully both prongs of those appreciations help us want to preserve and protect these animals and where they live.
So tell me a little bit about Seafood Watch, because that has been such a great resource for chefs and consumers.
Well, in the early 90s, the aquarium put together an exhibit that was all around how we get our seafood, the farm side, the wild side. We wanted people to understand where their food was coming from. And those of you who have been around and were, doing our thing in the 90s, food wasn't really such a topic back then, Chris. I think people didn't necessarily think about local and organic and all of these things that they're kind of into now. My sister was a vegetarian. That was weird. But there weren't vegans and a lot of these other folks that we were exposed to here in the US. And so when Seafood Watch came along, it was the result of some studies and things going wrong around the world that we realized that one of the major impacts we have on the ocean, and mind you, Chris, we impact the ocean a lot. We've forever dumped in it. We have polluted. We've done all kinds of things to the ocean. But one of the most important things that we do is what we take out of the ocean. And we have to keep in mind that, like anything else, like your pantry, like your walk-in freezer, you can't keep taking things out if you're not putting things back in to replenish. So one of the major things that the ocean would appreciate from us is more careful extraction. Just being more careful about what we take out, both fish, but also minerals, all the kinds of things that we are just very extractive of as humans. So that's where Seafood Watch came in. We wanted to give people some idea of what they should eat and what they should not eat, because maybe we'd overdone it a little bit, over extracted, and there were species that we needed to give a break.
You know, this is amazing. And one of the things about Seafood Watch that I personally love, and you and I have talked about this before, is, you know, chefs are really busy people, you know, and we don't have time to be, you know, researching, you know, what's the state of whatever the fish or whatever the shellfish is. But we rely on experts like you and the folks that you work with to help us know what decisions we should be making. And you distilled it down to make it really easy.
Well, we hope we have. You know, here in the US, I know not everyone's from the US on the call. I just really want to point out that the US is one of the top 2 importers of seafood from around the world. So if you live someplace that's catching fish, there's a really high probability that somehow, some way, some of it is coming to the US. The US pays good prices for fish. We take a lot of fish from around the planet. And what we wanted to do was create a list of all of those species and do the scientific research to be able to say, you know, choose this tuna instead of that tuna, because the population here is healthier than the population over here. We wanted to give people some really clear guidance based on science about the impacts that the fisheries and the fish farms were having on the environment. And I think if there's anything we've learned in the last 3 years, Chris, it's that rumor and hearsay and misinformation are not the way we want to live our life. We need to see and understand and recognize the science and really put our weight behind that. It's much better than chasing rumors and chasing possibilities and being misled, perhaps, by people who aren't using science. They just want you to buy their fish from them.
So this is a really good topic, and we're gonna get to the whole thing here in a little bit of misconceptions and credible sources and all that, because that's obviously really, really important. Before we go there, question, this is again, you know, UN Ocean Conference. How are we doing today? What's the state of the oceans that we rely on? I mean, we rely on as a species, and we rely on as chefs to get our products from.
Well, you know, the UN does a really great job of taking the planetary condition and putting it into, you know, chewable bites. So if you haven't visited their website, I really encourage you to do it, because they have really cool graphics that you can read. I think the takeaway message is this: seafood consumption around the planet has way more than doubled in the last 25 years. There's more people on the planet. We are eating more seafood. There's places where now you can refrigerate a fish and fly it there that you couldn't do 20 years ago. It's not so much that there's just so many new people, but there's a lot better technology to get a perishable fish from the water to the table, even if you're in the middle of some continent that maybe didn't have the transportation or the technology to get that fish there, you know, decades ago. So we're eating a lot more fish. And as a result, we're seeing that the oceans, for example, have given us what it's given us what it can give us quantity-wise. We haven't been catching any more fish from the ocean in significant numbers since the mid-'80s. That's when the line started to flatten out and the ocean said, put more boats in, put more hooks in the water, do what you want. This is how much fish the ocean can provide. It's a limited resource. So we needed to then look in other directions, and we've been eating a lot more farmed fish since then. in the last 20 years, fish farming around the planet has increased 500%. I mean, that's a line like this, it's like we just keep eating more and more farm fish, which can be great. But the fact of the matter is, we're getting to a point where we've got to understand what the fish is, where it's coming from, so that we can make good choices, because we're putting more pressure than ever, and more people than ever want to eat fish.
So basically, people are consuming more fish because of increases in transportation, increases in technology. And if I hear you right, the oceans, we can't keep taking out. One of the things I keep hearing is that the fish that we're harvesting, wild fish, not in all locations, but in many, they're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which kind of indicates that we're putting a lot of pressure on. But you brought up aquaculture, and I know that many chefs, we buy fish from aquaculture operations because, prices, because we can get a very consistent product.
Okay.
Tell me about that, because, it's going back to this whole thing about information, misinformation, what is real information. We hear that aquaculture is amazing and it's going to solve all the problems. And then the next day we hear, oh, no, you should be eating wild, because actually aquaculture is terrible and it's destroying the environment. Help us understand this.
Well, Chris, as humans, we very much like an answer, right? A black and white answer. It's either good or it's not good. And like so many things in life, it's just not that easy. Also, as time ticks by, things have changed. So I remember, 25 years ago, when you looked around and said, show me some good aquaculture, show me a couple good farms where we can send chefs to get a good product. And Chris, there weren't many. So as we've grown this industry 500%, there's still a lot that aren't good. Now that's on the seafood watch list, and you can start to understand what's on there and why. But it's things like chemicals. It's things like catching a lot of fish to feed the fish that you're farming. So your footprint is actually quite large. Your impact's quite large. It has 10 different components of how you should look at a fish farm. Now, who has time to spend to look at those 10 different components of a fish farm?
Exactly.
I mean, now I recommend if you can go to those farms and dive and have a family vacation in the tropics, do it. It's good research. But you need to do it with an eye for, what am I seeing here? What's the impact? How is this something that's not sustainable, that's not really protecting the environment that it sits within? Now, the good news today is, Chris, it's a lot easier to find those better farms. We have a great number of farm fish that are on the green list. Something like tilapia is come so far, it's amazing. From a really red product to a whole lot of places where they've got a lot of fresh water and a lot of modified diet, so that those fish are coming out tasty and sustainable. And that doesn't happen by magic. Maybe everybody on this line's like, yeah, I hear all the time that we have a lot of power. The only way that tilapia story came around is because chefs latched onto a fish that they thought was something they could cook with and make delicious, and they saw an industry that was making improvements. That is what you're looking for. And there's a lot of examples of that, both in the ocean and on land. We have some tremendous land-based fish farms these days that are recycling the water and pulling out fish waste and making it into incredible organic manure for their farms next door. So they started to have, this contained unit of agriculture and fish that are really creating beautiful products.
So I can go to Seafood Watch and I can learn about aquaculture as well as wild fish.
Absolutely.
Very important, and very, very important to know. So let's go back now to this thing that you brought up early in our conversation, all about, okay, I'm a chef. I am, let's see, I'm pick somebody on my list here. I'm in South Korea, and I want to know, you know, about if this local fishing operation is good, or if this particular fish is good. Where do I go? I mean, you know, the internet is full of great stuff. It's full of not great stuff. Give us some pointers a little bit about how we as chefs get information. And to your point, you know, we are not marine biologists. We also don't have the time. You know, how do we get to those credible sources quickly, places and people who can guide us on the decisions we have to make every day in our operations?
I think that this is a little bit of work, but Chris, let me encourage people to not do all the work themselves. If you go to seafoodwatch.org, you can look up that fish, and 8 times out of 10, you're going to find something on the list that is the same species. And you can look and you can say, where is this from? How is it farmed? What's the story about this fish I'm finding? And that may help you to take your understanding to your fish farm in South Korea and say, you know, I want to know about the chemical usage. And I want to understand what you do when, you know, how many fish escape your farm per year. You know, what are some of the things that are on that criteria? And again, for farm fish, there's 10. For wild fish, it's just 4. You know, you can start to have a really informed conversation. Because if you don't do that, you're going to go to this person and say, is your fish sustainable? And you know what their answer is going to be? Yes. Because they may have some idea that they're doing better, or they may just know that that's a great way to sell a fish to a chef. I mean, you can say, is it organic? And they could say, yes. So you have to start having that enough of an information background that you can have those conversations. And I think that's really important, because across the board, you probably don't need all 1,900 of our recommendations. You probably only need 5 or 10. If you learn the fish that you're most working with, you're going to be able to have those conversations.
So what you're saying is, if I'm talking to my fish purveyor and I start to ask questions about, okay, where is this fish coming from? And maybe some, you know, if it's an aquaculture product, to ask some of those more specific questions, or if it's a wild product, to also ask some maybe specific questions about how it's farmed or how it's harvested, etc. And if my fish purveyor can't tell me, or if my fish purveyor says, no, don't worry, this is a totally sustainable product, what's your answer to that?
You need to have those questions. And again, the website, when you go and look it up and you look up farm tilapia, it's going to say chemical usage is great. Where they get the baby fish is great. What they feed them is great. You know, their interactions with wildlife is great. You know, these kinds of things, then you can turn around and say to that supplier, tell me about, you know, how they're catching this fish. Tell me about what they're feeding it. And I think it's like anything else, you know, from your kids on up. If you ask questions, you're going to know if they have those answers, right? And somebody who's doing really careful, sustainable work with their seafood is going to, like, the floodgates will open and this person will tell you where they're getting their food and how they source their stock and how they take care to shake all of those oyster cages so that they get a good shape and quality and taste. So they're going to give you their corporate secrets, and you're going to realize who's passionately taking care of a sustainable product and who doesn't really know what they're doing. And that's kind of what you're looking for.
You know, when we were talking previous chefs, we need to salt, sweet, umami, and skepticism. Salt, sweet, umami, and skepticism.
Right. A recipe always has to be a little like squint your eyes and say, really? Tell me more about that. Really? Okay, so that the person who's really informed is going to be able to not only convince you of that, but tell you the stories that you're going to want to go back and tell your staff so they can tell your diners. You know, when someone learns how every oyster at the oyster farm you use shakes those oysters every morning and flips them on the third morning so that they have all the great flavor and not so much like weird. Who's ever had an oyster and something weird crawls off the shell? Gross, like a worm crawls across your plate. You know, there's farmers who are out there shaking those oyster bins so that that kind of thing is reduced. It's just a great story to sort of be able to tell your people who are enjoying your food.
And we need good stories in restaurants. That always is positive. So Sheila, tell me about blue food.
So blue food is, I think, one of the important pieces that the UN is bringing to the table. It's this idea backed by the initiatives that the UN has put together for planetary sustainability that really talks about all of these components of food that make it blue or better for the water, more sustainable and ecological. So it's kind of exciting. There's a lot of criteria there. There's a lot of things that we need to do in our food systems. And it's not just about choosing sustainable species based on their environmental impact. It's social impact and water use and climate change and pollution. It's really taking all of these individual strings that we've been working on for 20 years and is pulling them together. Because how many times have we heard, here's a perfectly sustainable fish, but it couldn't be farther away from me on the other side of the planet, which means it has to go into a plane and travel, you know, in a better class of travel than I get to travel, you know, first class flight all the way around the world to get to you. And you just know, boy, it's sustainable, but it sure used a lot of gas to get here. So rather than seeing those trade-offs, we're looking for blue food, like everything to rise to a level. And it's really exciting. And I would say, Chris, the thing that's great about it is, you know, as exciting as it is, it's also a lot. But the seafood piece with using the sustainability recommendations from Seafood Watch, you can start to check that one off your list. You can start to say, I know I'm using the right species. Now what? You need to one by one take these challenges and say, I figured that piece out. What's next? That's all any of us can do.
That's great. So I'm seeing a bunch of questions come in here, and let's jump into those before we run out of time. The first one is a chef is asking this from Portugal. And he recently read that Portugal was responsible for 90% of the world shark fishing. Is this something that the UN and you are interested in, shark populations?
Well, absolutely, Chris. I mean, the shark is at the very top of the food chain. And so it just has an incredibly important role of shaping and keeping the rest of the food chain healthy, but they are also the canary in the coal mine, right? They're at the end of the line. If they're not getting food, if they're getting too many chemicals, if things are really altered for them, you're going to start seeing those populations have trouble. So monitoring and taking care of sharks is on all of our best interest. And I just want to point out that this is a perfect example of one of your Feed the Planet waste concepts. Most sharks, when they're caught, and I'm not saying all of them in Portugal, but a great majority of them are caught. And the only thing we're interested in are the fins, right? The swimming fin parts, because that can be used in parts of the world to make shark fin soup and other delicacies. That fin is worth a lot of money. The rest of the shark, not so much. So there are places where the sharks are literally brought on board, fins are removed, and the shark is thrown back overboard. In many cases, it's still alive, but obviously a lingering, terrible death. So if you're going to fish for sharks or any species or carrots or cows, take the whole thing into the kitchen, use the whole thing, right? Nose to tail. And that's the way to sustainably use a shark. On top of the fact that we need to just not catch quite so many of them as we are now.
Great. I've got a couple of questions here about cod specifically. Also from Portugal, also from Canada, Toronto. And it's really a question about, is cod sustainable or not? I know that fisheries were in deep trouble. And one of the chefs comments that, well, but now he's seeing actual, packages of cod that says sustainable on it. What's happening in the world of cod? Because cod is a fish that is consumed globally with, a lot of importance.
Well, cod's another really potentially complicated species, because I think cod is sort of like the term dog. There's a whole bunch of different dogs around the world. There's a whole bunch of different cods around the world. So you need to know where your cod's coming from, right? Where was it landed? How was it caught? And my guess is that there's probably cod that they're catching off Portugal that indeed is probably being done sustainably. It may even be certified. It really depends where it's from and how they're doing that. So again, ask the questions. If it's coming, for example, from the US Atlantic cod fishery, that's not sustainable. We fished that so hard for so long that we've literally taken one of the world's great fisheries. There's a whole book called just Cod. If you haven't read Cod, I encourage you to read it, because you'll learn about that fishery, but also so many other lessons about how we're using these wild resources. But I would say that, cod from the Atlantic is on our red list, and it's been there for a long time, and we're not seeing great response or rebound from that population. So it's kind of fingers crossed, but the thing we can do right now is not eat it. It's definitely on the list of things to not eat.
And this is why, chefs, we need people like Sheila. We need resources like Seafood Watch. And I've seen over in the chat here, people are posting other resources. Continue to share these. Continue to share what you're learning with your colleagues. And I would also say that, as Chef Thomas, said in the beginning, power of the white jacket. We talk about power of the white jacket so many times, but power of the white jacket only works when we are saying things from an educated, truthful standpoint. And I think this is where, Sheila, you've come back to, the science, and really finding the resources like Seafood Watch that can tell us what the science is today. Where is that cod being caught? Is it, green? Is it yellow? Is it red? What should we be doing? And then distilling that down for us chefs so we can make good choices. And by the way, I'll end with this, because I also think it's important that we educate our consumers, the people sitting in the restaurant, to say this fish we're serving is sustainable because, and oh, by the way, yes, I really would like to have, this fish. I'm sorry, we don't serve that because it is not a healthy fish population, and we are trying to make the right decisions. What a great message to give to your customers. And lastly, Sheila, thank you for mentioning the book Cod. Everything that he writes is amazing. He's got some great books out there. But anyways, with that, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's joined us. Time is precious, and we really, really are grateful for that. For the people that I met in Abu Dhabi, what a joy that was. What a whirlwind that was. And I'm thankful for all of you. I also want to give a shout out to Lynn and Senya in Paris. You guys, you're the rock stars behind the scenes, and none of this happens without you. So again, a huge thank you to you. And last but not least, Sheila, thank you for getting up. When I asked you to do this, I kind of was very like, it's going to be really early. And I just want to thank you for taking the time. And of course, a huge thank you to you for everything you've done with the sustainability curriculum. We have relied on people like you, experts like you, to help us know what to do. So you've given of your time very selflessly, and a huge thank you. So
thank you, Chris. And again, anytime, and anyone on this call who has a question they're not getting answers for, please forward that on to me. You know, the Monterey Bay Aquarium pays me to work with chefs because you hear it a million times, but please hear it from me. What you can do to change food systems is unparalleled by any other force out there trying to do this work. So the investment in you is clear and confident and steady. So please, I want to hear from you all.
All right, we're going to post your email. Be careful what you wish for. Anyways, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you again next month for another one. Take care. Bye-bye.